Hey everybody, welcome to the final part of the analysis of the EUCF 2019 Open Final. In this part we're going to look at the end of the game and then have a summary which looks at all of the scores, the turnovers, the hucks and much more. Enjoy! Bologna come out with their loose switchy defence again, and Clapham find the holes with a couple of hammers, the first one going down the sideline and the second one on quite a high stall count going into the end zone for the score. In this point, Bologna's O-line comes out and strings together 22 passes with a couple of stoppages in between. There isn't any switching and little poaching from Clapham. Clapham are playing a strict one-to-one defense, and although it applies some consistent pressure, Bologna never look too flustered. They have a couple of really nice lasered inside-out flicks, and Laffy really creates the score here as he catches the disc and immediately gets balanced, faces the center of the space behind the force. And at this point it feels like Lefotta are definitely going to score. We all know from running drills that there's not much here that the force can do to stop some kind of throw going out to the break side. Laffy keeps all of his options open and then hits the throw perfectly. The score follows soon after. Clapham brick the pool and run a horizontal stack set play, but the Bologna handler defenders sag off, meaning the first pass has got to go to a fairly isolated Hori on the side. When Parslow dumps the disc off the sideline, the next thrower is isolated again, with really only two options, one being this cut from Briggs which is marked out, and the other one being a throw back to Parslow. Parslow is able to get the disc, and now let's look at Andy Lewis. He's got separation on his defender and he uses it really well, getting the disc into his hands, timing this fake to maintain that separation, and then running an excellent throw and go move with Hori so his defender still hasn't caught up and he moves the disc towards the far side. It's interesting to note here that the Bologna defender could have made a legit pick call, but as with a lot of picks, this switch was actually the better choice. Lewis fires a brilliant backhand into the end zone for Cartwright. Cartwright was the player that Lewis had faked to a couple of passes earlier in the offense, and you see because Lewis moves the disc quickly, then the two are able to connect on the far side. At the beginning of the next point, Justin keeps his eye on the thrower and leaves his mark to go and get a poach D. Bologna recover quickly and Clapham's flow stops as they look to set up their end zone set. They show it's really not their day with a simple drop on the far sideline. Bologna get the disc moving quickly after the turnover and after a timeout randomly throw a 50-50 disc into the end zone to no separation at all. Connor unfortunately misreads the late inside out dip on the disc and Bologna get their 14th point on the board. Clapham again seem to run a set play from catching the pool, which seems to reduce the separation that their cutters have on the defenders. They grudgingly take a reset into their own end zone, and then Hori manages to get some good separation going deep, but it's quite close to the sideline, and with Clapham's last touch of the disc in the game, it gets hucked out of bounds. Bologna work the disc downfield and onto the break side. The stall count gets quite high at one point, but then they're able to complete this curving pass to the far sideline. Flow is kept alive with this quick pass to the poached player, who dishes it off without hesitation, keeping the disc moving, changing the angle of attack, and Bologna are able to put in the final point, making it a resounding 15-7 victory. Now let's quickly recap the main points of this game. Let's break this down first by Clapham's D-line against Bologna's O-line. Clapham came out a few times with a more zonal look, which Bologna were very adept at breaking through, either with one killer pass or with a series of passes in flow. When they were not playing zone, they'd play tight one-to-one defense. And Bologna were very good at keeping the disc over on the break side, which meant that it was a constant threat, and it made scoring on the front cone open side easier, as the defenders had to respect the break space more. If we look at Bologna's D-line coming down against Clapham's O-line, Clapham started the game quite confidently, taking over the top shots and hammers to find the free players on the field. This confidence reduced dramatically during the course of the game, possibly because of a couple of unexpected Bologna defenders coming out to put pressure on these overhead passes. So then Clapham started to second guess themselves and would end up with the disc in their hands for long periods of time as they waited for plays to develop. Their fallback was to run their cutting patterns, however this was playing into Bologna's hands as they would sag off the handlers into the throwing lanes and nullify the cuts that were happening downfield. Lefotta would also at some points play very tight one-to-one defense, so Clapham O never really knew what they were going to face and spent a lot of time trying to see what the defenders were doing. Lefotta's D-line really won the game for them. They got a number of turns with their different approaches and their smart switches, and when they were on offense they were ruthless and rapid, running to the disc after every turnover, taking the open passes and keeping the disc moving, not allowing Clapham's O-line to set their D at all. This meant that practically every turnover they got was converted into a score. Both Bologna and Clapham had attempts at poaching, however only one of these was a clear poach D, and that came from Clapham. Lafota were better at punishing the poaches that Clapham made, whereas Lafota attempted poaching more often, and sometimes their teammates would back them up by covering for them. However, when Clapham got separation, they weren't as good as Bologna at taking full advantage of this, as even if they got the disc to the poached player in space, they would hold on to it for a second, allowing that separation to be eaten up, rather than doing a throw and go move to maintain that separation. This meant that Bologna had a number of poach D attempts which were essentially free. Both teams had moments where they should have developed a poach into a switch, but again Bologna were quicker to punish this than Clapham were. Clapham attempted switching less and less as the game went on, possibly because of this blown switch at 4-4, where the two players just weren't on the same page at all. It's quite common to react to a blown switch by then shutting down all switching, however there are a number of times where switching or a more heads-up approach to defense would have been better for Clapham. Clapham attempted 6 long throws or hucks in this game, compared to Bologna's 4. Clapham only completed 2 of these hucks, and all the ones that were caught were very close. This was perhaps because Bologna were adding more pressure on the force, in particular they were trying to shut down Briggs's flick, and also covering the deep gutters through early switching so that they never got free. They'd like to huck it down the sideline, but only 1 out of 3 of those attempts connected. Bologna were far less inclined to throw deep, only attempting it 4 times in this game. Each of those attempts, however, was successful, although 3 of them could have gone either way, and if Clapham were having a better day, then they probably would have got the interceptions on those 3. Instead, Bologna preferred to work the disc around with shorter passes, and to score in flow rather than from one long cut. Case in point, you can see here Bruno Mine faking the deep throw to Vagliavello. This gets the Clapham defender committing slightly, so when Bruno throws the underpass, the next pass available is to Vagliavello, who has those extra yards because of that deep fake. This means the disc advances 40 yards in 2 passes rather than 60 yards in 1 pass. Vagliavello pivots inwards and is unfortunately fouled, as the Clapham defender has already committed a bit too much to covering the down the line, which is where he expects Vagliavello to pivot first. Lafota threatened the break side a lot during the game, and 3 of their scores were to the front corner on the break side of the end zone. Another 5 scores were to the open side corner, usually coming from the back middle of the field, forward to the front corner, one time from a missed switching opportunity, and these were probably clearer options because the break side was being threatened so much. For 5 of their scores, the force was kind of irrelevant because they were getting the disc moving so quickly that it wasn't really clear which way the force was. It was more a case that the score was generated through flow, maintaining constant threats with the disc in their hands. 2 of their scores were more fortunate, coming off the back of either amazing catches to save throwaways or misreads from the defense on 50-50 discs. 3 of Clapham's scores were from hucks or long throws going crossfield or down the side of the field, and this is something that Clapham liked to do, but they didn't really get that many opportunities to against Lafota. 2 of their scores came from hard cuts to the front corner of the end zone on the open side. 1 of their scores was because of a blown poach, and another was from a hammer to the break side back corner on a high stall. Lafota turned over 3 times in this game. Once was an execution error on a throw, another was a combination of decision making, defensive pressure and execution, and the third one was field vision not seeing a poach from Clapham. Clapham, on the other hand, turned over 9 times. 4 of these turnovers were largely down to execution errors, combination of drops, throwaways and slips. 3 of the turns were from contested hucks, where Lafota managed to get some pressure under the disc and Clapham weren't able to win the battle. One of these was partly thanks to a switch that Lafota did just before the huck went up. One of the turns was field vision combined with a little bit of execution, and one of the turns can be put down to miscommunication. The difference in this game came from Bologna's consistent pressure on defense. They would punish any Clapham errors, including just a player hanging out a little bit too deep, would suddenly become a poaching and switching opportunity for them. They were able to cut out Clapham's pool plays by coming down different types of defense, and really took the confidence out of Clapham's throwers. When they were on offense, Bologna were much messier than Clapham, but this played to their advantage as it meant they were able to generate flow a lot easier, finding free players and bouncing the disc between each other in a way that Clapham found it very difficult to stop. This was particularly useful for their D-line, as Clapham's O-line was just reeling from turning over and would concede the point very quickly. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in future years, as these Bologna players are able to move the disc between each other so quickly, partly because they've been playing in this loose system for so long together already. There's a big youth scene in Bologna with more and more players coming up through the development programs, whereas Clapham are able to bring in players from all across the UK, knowing that they're going into the best team in the country. This match showed that Bologna's connections with each other worked really well with their dynamic approach to offense, where either they would be moving the disc really quickly, or they would have it lingering on the break side looking for opportunities. Their poaching and switching on defense countered Clapham's more rigid offensive style very well. Although that style's worked well for Clapham in the past, and you see it in a lot of the American teams, there's potential for Bologna's defense to get even better, but we'll have to see which team changes and which team evolves as we go into next year. I hope you enjoyed this series of videos. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the little bell icon in order to get notifications when my next series comes out. Let me know what you want to see more of. You can find full footage of the final and loads of other games on fancy.com, and I'll see you again soon.